It's the Miscellaneous Podcast. Your hosts, Polly.
That will be 1 + 1 + 2 + 1, not 1 + 2 + 1 + 1.
And Josh.
Double shifts. No breaks.
Chappie was, I think, at school.
Yes, her molecular epidemiology paper is due tomorrow.
And Sin was preoccupied. Special guest, Frasley.
Yes, Commissioner.
Prepare yourself for a blow. We think it's the Joker.
Good grief.
With a title that says it all.
I still don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Let's get to it.
Sounds like poopycock.
I'm just a small little pebble in the biggest pond ever. And
man, but that's the mistake a lot of people make.
That's not true. You're known in Hunters Terrace United Kingdom.
And Zephyriah wants to slap you.
Why?
I don't know, but she just said she wants to slap you.
Okay.
You guys gonna roll the show?
Yep. I was waiting for Chappie, but I know she's still stuck on something, but that's okay. And Sin was supposed to be on, but wow, I just look like I'm failing as a podcaster today. So real quick, Frasley, Josh, Cupcake, she's also here if she wants to type anything in for Discord. We're gonna be interviewing Dr. Michael Lynch, a world-renowned parapsychologist, inventor, TV, radio personality. He's been on tons of things, and so,
still on tons of things. No one's. But anyway,
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I have a set of questions that I got from listeners, and we're just kind of wing it. We were going to talk about urban exploration and going through abandoned buildings as well. And the reason why is because I went through the parking lot of Jamestown Mall, and we had kind of forced a barrier out of the way, and we went driving around there before we got freaking out that we'd get caught.
Before you got shot in the stomach with a bow and arrow.
That got me interested, and Spiffy, who was on the show last week, we talked about this, and he's like, yeah, I do that all the time. And I was like, cool, because I watch a lot of YouTube stuff, like Exploring with Josh and Dan Bell and all that stuff. So I wanted to talk about that and blah, blah, blah. And I know, Dr. Lynch, you pretty much go through a lot of abandoned buildings in regard to...
There's some abandoned buildings that are haunted, and then there are some that are not abandoned and are haunted. And then that is the whole crazy thing about hauntings and things like that. Now, when you get into old hospitals or warehouses and things like that, back at the turn of the century, a lot of this stuff was built for scientific research or whatever they want to call it. And they use a lot of products pre-war, and then after World War II, they used a lot of asbestos and a lot of fillers that were in the concrete to make it fireproof, make it just more containable if it did ever break into a fire. But most of the stuff was made out of wood, very little steel. It was all brick and mortar, things like that. So you wanted to build a building that you're going to invest a lot of money into, and it's going to be heavily financed, and you want it to last for at least 50 years before it becomes you have the inability to maintain it. And that's why a lot of buildings fall to ruin. It's because of financing, ideas changed in the society, lack of financing to maintain it either through the state or personal wealth. And so you have the burden of these buildings passed down to a lower generation, another generation that doesn't really care too much about their history. It really falls on people who really want to save history, not really get involved with it, but save buildings and structures and substructures. So
yeah, I get that, because some of the stuff they go through, like Dan Bell with the Mall series, it is really cool to see, even though it's decaying, what like some of these places used to look like.
Yeah, like Crestwood Mall and things like that have disappeared because people have just torn them down. The land that they're on actually becomes more valuable than the building itself. And after a certain time period, like let's say the 70s, or the early 80s, most of these structures were not designed to last for very long. It was planned obsolescence that was built into the building, just like it was built into other things. And then cities changed their codes on fire, electrical, water, things like that. So everything has to have a sprinkler system. Everything has to have a certain type of wiring system. Everything has to have sump pumps. Everything has to have, something new has been added, which these older buildings just cannot be maintained or cannot be force fitted into the 21st century. So as engineering goes, you'll see more and more metal being put in, more and more brick and mortar as a facade on the outside, even though you're paying the high price as if it was solid brick structure or whatever. It's really all the facade because of speed and the cost of materials. So you could have a $500,000 home or $1 million building, but because the way it was built during its time is going to decide whether it lasts or not. And many times they do not last. What you have is twofold. One is you have the mental concept of what that building was, what its function was, and can it be revamped and renewed into a new legal structure into the 21st century? Does it have purpose or functionality? And then you get into certain parts of St. Louis, these buildings have served their purpose and now need to be destroyed. But it doesn't technically mean you have to put a parking lot back into its place.
Yeah. It's but right by the arch, there's that. Well, if you go down 70, like you're heading 70 east, right before you hit the downtown area, there's this rundown area that I always thought would be the coolest renovation area because it'd be right next to where you have this scenic view of the city. But I mean, even the neighborhood's run down, like you said, it's ran its course of what it is.
Question: why do we talk out loud when we know we're alone?
Titanic exhibit in Orlando. Many of the staff, they believe it's haunted by people who died on the Titanic. Many strange stories have been told. So, Fraz, are you talking about the exhibit or like the items, or?
Well, the exhibit houses a lot of items from the Titanic, and it's kind of an exhibit that's recreated parts of it. And when I was a kid, I would talk with some of the staff, and they couldn't verify if it was the survivors, but just many strange stories. Like they would I'm trying to recall all of them, but and I was thinking because of all the historic artifacts there, maybe it could have drawn them to it.
When the Titanic was here in touring in St. Louis, I actually took an expedition through it, and many of the stuff was haunted by the former owners of the that possessed these merchandise on the Titanic, and that's the weird part about it. What has happened was when they took these possessions on board, they were probably the most expensive possessions they had, and there was a lot of merchandise on the Titanic. A lot of people didn't realize that, but there were crates of champagne, crates of whiskey, crates of clothing, just a bunch of crates for shipping and handling, plus the passengers that were there that took their best clothes. And so that was some of the higher priced custom made clothing. We actually went with a psychic, and we looked for ghostly activity as well as psychic activity. And we were pinpointing not everything, but there were a lot of unique objects. Like one bottle of champagne was haunted. A pair of pants was haunted. And we could go on like this. It was like a hit and miss scenario. But I would say at least 10% of almost everything that was on the Titanic is probably haunted. And there's an exhibit down in Branson, Missouri.
Yeah.
Which is still haunted. They claim that there's still hauntings going on down there.
Speaking of...
When you have, such, personal property, it's, when that person passes on, it makes sense that they would, be attached to that. Maybe that pair of pants was, the last bit of money they had, and so they spent it to go on the Titanic so they could look good like everyone else did. So it makes sense that they would be attached to that stuff.
Oh yeah, the very wealthy were on the Titanic. There were several dukes and corporate businessmen that were well into the multi-millions of dollars, and these guys stayed on board while everything else died. And I'm not saying everything else died, but everyone else was kind of getting off.
Yeah, while the ship was going down.
Yeah, they stayed on board because they just felt it was their obligation to remain there. So there was a lot of wealthy people, a handful of wealthy people that did die on the Titanic because they just refused to get off. And then there were the other people, the middle class people that were looking for a better future. They were taking their better clothes, their better luggage, and they were being hustled and bustled toward America. The other ones that were on the bottom of the ship were virtually, whatever kind of labor, Irish or whatever.
Yeah, they call it D-class.
Yeah, D-class, and they were just doing whatever they had on. They had no luggage. A lot of people say going down and getting these artifacts from the bottom of the ocean with the Titanic's history and paraphernalia and things like that. That's a bad omen. It's like robbing a grave. And in one aspect, it's true. But in the other aspect, it is history, and we do need to history because it really did happen on both sides. It happened to the British as well as it did to the Americans.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's any different than like if they would find, say,
sunken treasure.
a Spanish ship that had sunken treasure. I mean, yeah, you're going to get the treasure, but I mean, you're also going to find stuff like buttons and whatever has survived the years. It's no different, I don't think.
No, it's the same. It's the same. In any shipping industry catastrophe like this is just it has a fear of panic and austere to it. So it's not really sacred. We put the sacred value on it. So, but the hauntings can still continue because those things are haunted. Like they say, possession is 9/10 of the law. And that's kind of the way this is. If an item is possessed or haunted, it will remain haunted until the person himself or herself relinquishes the haunting.
Gives up the ghost, as it were.
Gives up the ghost, right. To let it go kind of.
Let Uncle Christopher tell you the ghost with one black eye.
I have a question from Kyle. He wants your point of view on Robert the Doll. And is it worse than Annabelle?
Oh, that question's been thrown around a lot lately.
I know Annabelle is absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, is it worse? I don't know if it's any worse, but I would say they're almost exactly the same. It just depends how you want to look at it psychologically and pseudo-psychologically. You could look at it as, a true possession.
Have you been to the Annabelle doll?
No, I haven't. I just got it online,
I have. Oh my God.
Yeah. Like I said, any item can be possessed and any person can be possessed to a certain extent. So you really have to look at what force is possessing it. That's where it's at. You have to see kind of behind that veil, that curtain, and a good psychic can get you there and find out why that thing is possessed or not. But there is a lot of, you can go to a regular flea market or antique shop and buy a product and bring it home and not realize that it's haunted. But in a lot of cases, you'll actually bump into something that never sells or is always being returned. And then that is the thing, Yeah,
there's a reason for that.
there is a reason for that. John Zaffis has the Haunted Museum.
Amazing man, by the way.
Yeah, and he started out with his uncle and aunt, and they started collecting these things, and then it got so much to where they had to go into the garage and start building shelves in the garage because they had all these collections and things like that. Now, his uncle was Ed Warren, and he did a lot of so-called exorcisms where John Zaffis actually participated and assisted in several exorcisms. So when the world got tight, they always went to John Zaffis. But anyway, so John has said there's only a couple of things in his haunted museum that actually are haunted the way he feels, like a player piano will play or a doll will talk or something will happen along those lines. It's not everything in his museum is haunted, but it came from a haunted location. I'll bet you dimes to donuts on that. So yeah, each case has its own little quirks to it. And I never compare cases. We just kind of go through them to see how they add up in the parapsychological profile, and then how creepy or damaging they are to whomever it affects. So there is an effect of the object, what it's doing, how it's doing it, onto the general public or the person that owns it. And then there is, who's controlling that behind all that. And that may be the only translatable part to that ability for a haunting. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie, but the movie Christine by Stephen King, there was a movie that came out, and there was this car that possessed this guy in order to have the energy to drive around. And as he drove around, the odometer would go backward. So he gets into an accident, and the car just virtually rebuilds itself to where it's a brand new car again. So, but the car was using the chi, the life force of the driver in order to do that. And that's kind of the way these things also work. They need a medium like the car in Christine, but they also need something else to activate it, to get it to render itself, into this world as a medium piece, as a piece. Yeah.
I've actually been to the place where they keep the Annabelle doll, and it's very strange because there's signs on it. It's like, do not touch the doll. Do not disrespect the doll. Do not, take pictures or make fun of the doll. And there's actually letters that are around it from people who have, in some, maybe the doll is possessed and they've disrespected the doll, and bad things have happened to those people until they've gone back and written a letter of apology and actually apologized to the doll, and the bad things stop happening to them.
Yeah, I believe that.
How much of that is, perceived, and, so a large portion of it, I'm sure, because when you start paying attention to bad things happen. But, I'll bet you, a good portion of that is, actually, you disrespect the doll, and all of a sudden, things start happening. You get, 3 flat tires on the way home. You're like, what?
Well, there are different areas out there. We can go back as far as Tutankhamun. When Tutankhamun's door was found, it had a curse written on it, and all the Egyptians were there. And Carter goes, the hell with curses, let's just go on in there. And so Carter goes in, and then they find Tutankhamun's, statues and stuff like that. And they get to the actual sarcophagus, and it says right on it, do not open because you'll be cursed the rest of your life. Well, Carter just goes ahead and just does whatever. But the people around Carter seem to die in very mysterious ways. I think it was 12 or 14 people die over the next 5 years.
How does everyone around them die? Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. There's another place called, oh my God, my memory goes sometimes. I think it's called Cody. Cody? It's a small abandoned mining town up in California, up in the mountains in California. That may not be the right name, but I think it's called Cody something. Anyway, it was a mining town and it was abandoned. So the national park went up and they started turning it into a national park because there were a lot of people going up there and they were tearing the place up. And so they go, okay, we'll just declare this a national state park or a state park, and we will, have tours and show everyone what the Old West was like and things like that. So maybe it's Cody, Wyoming. But anyway, so they turn it into a park, and then all of a sudden people start picking stuff up like nails and pieces of wood. And there's a sign that says, do not take anything from this location because it's an authentic mining town in the 1800s. And so people start taking stuff home. Well, within a week or two, they get a box back in the mail and the objects start coming back. And they say that it is because we picked this item up and took it home and we started having the worst run of luck. And it went on until we mailed it back to that state park. And this is not just one time. This is 30 or 40 times a year. People pick stuff up. Yeah.
Cody, Wyoming. That's where it was.
Cody, Wyoming. Okay. Yeah. It was a small mining town. There's also a couple of other locations, and people claim different stories about Hawaii, that you're not supposed to take any of the lava rock back to the mainland because there'll be a curse on you and all of the other stuff. So people, get an auto-suggestion. They get an auto-suggestion like, oh, look out for my big dog because my big dog may bite you. And then you're constantly looking out for a big dog. So I don't have a big dog. I just lied to you on that one. But it's like people just sit there and say, oh, there's a big dog here. And then they automatically, by the suggestion, start looking for a dog. And there was a report. There was a report done. There's this guy over in England, and he is a skeptic. He's a skeptic. And so he went around and had a podcast. It was called The Haunted. So he goes out.
I remember that show.
Yeah, and he goes out, and he's kind of, in the middle. He's not really a skeptic, but he's more of a journalist than a skeptic. But anyway, so one time he goes out to a location, and he says, hey, this is supposed to be haunted. And the guy goes, oh, no, it's not. I created a fictitious story that I tell people, and they believe it. And then they drive out here, and then I give them a tour for like $5. And then they claim that they see haunted people and take haunted pictures and all this other stuff. And it's totally a farce.
Funny.
And so this guy has started a cottage business by claiming that something on his property is haunted. And then he just starts this tour. And then everyone throws in $5, and they go on this little walking tour. And he just tells them this whole story, which is just totally made up.
That's like something Cocktail Joe would do.
I have a haunted wallet that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's fantastical. Now, the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis.
At the dawn of the 20th century, the Lemp family name was synonymous with grand financial success in the beer industry. Their signature brew, Falstaff beer, could be imbibed across the world. But the untimely death of a beloved son presaged disaster. Soon, suicide struck, then again, and again, and again. By 1950, 4 Lemp descendants had killed themselves, 3 of whom perished inside the gloomy Lemp family mansion in St. Louis.
One of the first explorations that we took under seriously because there was just too many stories over too long a period of time to have come up with anything like this. So in retrospect, I think there were tons of stuff we threw out that we should have probably listened to a little bit more. And then there was tons of stuff that were there that we just couldn't hardly believe at the time. So anyway, we did our investigations. We found ghosts there. It kind of went along with the stories that were being told. And then there's this guy who says he's related to the Lemps, direct descendant, and he's going to write a book, a tell-all book on how all this ghost stuff is just poppycock. And anyway, I think he did finish the book. I think it's out now. I haven't read it yet, but it's kind of like he's saying, no, that none of this was true. This has all been embellished and handed down over time, and legends just grew. And then now people think that this is, the most haunted house in St. Louis. And I kind of agree it is, besides the Demonil Mansion, which is right up the street. So some people can look at it one way as if this is just totally bogus. All these stories have been embellished. You put supposition on this, and then this is the way it happened. But
what
he's
mansion
claiming.
Are you talking about? You said the mansion up the road. What is that called?
The Demonil Mansion.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's haunted. It's so haunted. It goes way back to the 50s and 60s. People who hear screaming and yelling and coming from the Demonil Mansion. Anyway, it got so bad at one time. Now, the Demonil, I think, is a museum now. But it got so bad that the last person who lived in the Demonil had the bathroom taken downstairs into the living room because he said the upstairs was so haunted he couldn't even go to the bathroom. So there's pictures of the Demonil with this old man who's getting taken off to the old folks' home. And they asked him about his bathroom, why his bathroom was in the living room. And he said it was because it was so haunted. Now, the people that bought the house after that, it fell into decay for a little while. And then a very wealthy family came in and bought it, rehabbed it, put it back to all to normal. And they don't talk about ghosts or anything like that. But I've been in the building several times, and I can tell you it's haunted.
You know, the weirdest thing is like the Lent Mansion, for as many people as gone in there and investigated, and psychics have come in, paranormal investigators, parapsychologists, for as many people as come in there, there is just an underwhelming amount of evidence in there.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. So yeah, because like we spent the night over there, and I didn't feel a thing. I didn't no weird, no beardo, no nothing.
Okay,
I don't know.
That could have been that event. I spent the night over there, and I had so much stuff I couldn't believe it. And there was this one night I was over there, and a bunch of people were there, and they were doing investigations. And so I said, "Well, have you found anything?" And they go, "No." And I said, well, "Okay." So I walk outside and start taking still photography. And I get so many entities outside on still photography, it just blows your mind. So I said, okay, when people are inside acting like morons, they're going to be outside. And when the house calms down, then they're going to come inside. And I've seen them walk right through the door, not physically, not a full-bodied apparition, but I've seen the orb or the consciousness just kind of come inside the door, look at me, and walk away. There are some other guys.
Did you use any of your other Paravision stuff with it? Because I know for the pictures and the video I saw from when you were there with Dave Glover, I mean, he had all these different attachments on your cameras and everything. And
cool. I got everything. I'm working on a new one right now. As soon as I get the parts in, called the Boss or the Quad Boss or whatever. But it's going to have two distinct nanometer wavelengths of light. One at the high end of the spectrum and the low end of the spectrum, and of infrared light. And so it's just going to be one wavelength. So it's 940 nanometers and 850 nanometers. So it's just one, or this will be two wavelengths of light being projected. So the camera can see just those two wavelengths. I don't need any other lighting in the room.
Cool.
And so that's how I see the entities. Now, connected with that, with all my equipment, is a handheld gun laser that reads the temperature. So if one stands still long enough, you can shoot it, get its temperature right there, and you'll see the light hit it and then bounce around inside of it and then come out. Strangest thing in the world. Yeah.
Wow.
So you can take its temperature, you can take the air temperature, the wall temperature, and it all will have a different temperature situation. So I just built a new one called the Trinity, where it has one of the most powerful lighting, lowest energy, highest power light scenarios with the lowest lux camera. I mean, this is military grade camera, and I can be in total pitch black darkness and see like it's 12 o'clock noon. It's just phenomenal. It's one of the best upgrades I've ever done. And so I put it into a gun scenario because I had an old gun lying around.
And that's it for part 1 of Dr. Michael Lynch's miscellaneous Q&A. Stay tuned. Next few days, you'll have the other one pop up. Go through a lot of abandoned buildings in regard to phone call.
Oh, hang on a sec. I'm sorry. I didn't disconnect.